I grew up as a troubled kid in Houston who struggled in school and always felt behind the smart kids. Today, I own businesses that do over $100 million a year. It's not because I'm smarter or work harder, it's because I learned how to learn fast. In a world where AI gives everyone the same answers, intelligence is commoditized. The real advantage is how quickly you can learn and use what you learn to make good decisions. So in this video, I'm not giving gimmicks or hacks. I'm breaking down how the top 1% actually learn. You'll discover how your brain really works and how to use it the right way to achieve everything that you want. So I'll give you a somewhat recent example. So a few years ago, I had basically fired myself as CEO from all of my businesses. And I thought I wanted to go, build a holding company and then, do whatever I wanted to do with my time and not have to operate any businesses anymore. And so I decided, I'd accumulated this money over time and I wanted to learn investing. And so when I made my first $1 million at like 25 years old, I bought some single family homes. I'd bought stocks over the years, but didn't really know what I was doing. But I noticed, Warren Buffett, he had basically built this holding company that allowed him to own lots of different businesses that he didn't have to operate any of them. So I love that model. So I started studying what you would call value investing. And so value investing is basically trying to buy businesses at less than what they're worth, typically publicly traded companies, though it also works with private businesses. So I wanted to learn this style of investing. So I decided to dig into that space and actually spend a few years doing it. And I ended up, to kind of give you the end result, is I ended up learning value investing. I went to multiple Berkshire Hathaway annual events, and I beat the S&P 500 every single year. Part of that's luck, but part of it's just the skill of learning exactly how this works. And so that was the value of learning that. It's made me easily millions of dollars already and will for the rest of my life. How did I go about learning that skill of value investing? Because this is how you can learn anything faster, whether it's a physical skill, a business skill, something you need for school or for work. The same approach applies. The first step is to get the big picture, or what I would call the lay of the land. Because if you're entering a space that you know nothing about, you need to see, what are the edges of this thing? How does this whole thing actually work? And so in that case, you could do this probably in a couple of hours. Start reading some different blog posts, pick up a few different books, kind of skim a few different books. See if you can get the whole scope of this. Like, what does investing look like? Like, if you were to go to Amazon and start looking through different categories of investing, you're going to see things like value investing, stock trading, options trading. You're going to see people talking about, buying index funds, buying bonds, all kinds of different things, buying cryptocurrencies. There's going to be books on all of that stuff. So that's giving you kind of the lay of the land or the bigger picture. So looking at Amazon is a good source, looking at a handful of different blogs, maybe open up like 20 to 30 different blog articles that pop up for the top thing you're talking about. You have to read them all, just scroll through them, then you're like, okay, I've kind of got an idea of the bigger picture of this. And then your next goal is to start digging into the people that everyone says are the leaders in that space. So this is the biggest shortcut to learning faster, is to finding who to learn from. And so, Warren Buffett would give the idea of applied to companies and investing. Like, if you wanted to find the best companies in an industry, you would go ask, 5 of the competitors and say, hey, if I wasn't going to invest in your business, or if you weren't going to invest in your business, who in your space would you invest in? And then that'll kind of triangulate and give an idea of who the best people in that space are. And so your goal going into any area is to find out who to learn from. And unfortunately, most blog posts are not written by the people you want to learn from. What you want to be looking for is, who are they recommending? Who are they looking up to in that space? Who do they keep talking about, referencing, quoting? That gives you an idea of who to learn from. I wanted to learn value investing. Every value investor on the planet is going to talk about Warren Buffett. Then you start going a few layers deeper. They're going to talk about the late Charlie Munger, who is his business partner. Go a few layers deeper, you may come across people like Monish Babrai or Joel Greenblatt, those kind of different people. You start going, okay, Phil Fisher, and you start getting an idea, okay, these are the 5 or 6 people that you really want to learn from. Then you start going deep into those people. So this is where I recommend reading books, because the reason I prefer books to almost any other form of communication, whether it's podcasts or whether it's blog articles, videos on YouTube, any of that sort of stuff, is somebody who wrote a book, they probably condensed 10 years of their life into like 200 pages. To me, it's the most efficient way to learn. And so the way I recommend reading books, though, is a little bit specific, whether it's a textbook or a nonfiction book or really anything, is you first want to read the back cover just to get an idea of what this book is about. Then I recommend reading the table of contents so you can get a mental picture in your head of the structure of this thing. Then I recommend reading the first chapter in detail, then read the last few pages of the book so you can kind of see it. This is how it starts, this is how it ends, and then you start skimming. And so most books, when you're first digging into a subject, like when I was digging into value investing, I was reading these books like word for word, and I was like, oh my God, this is all new, all so amazing. Once you go through a few of these books, you're going to realize they're all saying the same stuff. It's going to be very hard to find anything new because everyone's just kind of regurgitating the same content. And so your goal is to first find out who to learn from, then absorb as much content from those people as possible. And unless you find something really interesting in the content you pick up, such as books, then you basically are just skimming to find if there's anything new there for you. At first, you may read more deeply because there's not going to be as much stuff you already know. But then once you get an idea of the space, you're going to be skimming a lot, which is totally fine. I mean, this is basically how Charlie Munger read, how Monish Pabrai reads, how I read now. Buy lots of books. Some of them you don't even read. Then a lot of them you're just kind of opening and skimming through. And then very few do you read in detail. And even fewer do you read multiple times. So that's a good way. And then what you're looking for is you're kind of trying to triangulate among these great people in your space. What are the core ideas? What are the core ideas that they're talking about? Those are the big things that really matter. A lot of the little details and hacks and that sort of thing is not what's really going to move your life forward. You're trying to find the big picture. I remember Charlie Munger would talk about this. He said he did really well in law school. I think he graduated second in his class at Harvard Law School. And he said because he really understood the theories, the big picture things, not so much all the little details. And that's what really matters. Once you have those big frameworks in your head, you're able to make the important decisions that actually matter in your life. And as part of this process, a practice you should develop is to go deep or to be able to do deep work. And so the author Cal Newport, who has a good podcast as well, has wrote a book called Deep Work. Basically the idea that you should be able to lock yourself in a room, completely focus for periods of time so that you can really move your life forward, whether it's learning or producing. I discovered this when I was in college. And so I was always a decent student, I guess, later on when I got into college, I started getting more focused, but it was never exceptional. And then I realized when my busiest semester ever, I had, I think like 18 hours of classes. I had an internship I was doing. I was on this business plan team thing. I discovered the 9th floor of the library. And so up there, it was completely quiet. You could literally hear a pencil dropper, pencil tapping on the desk. And so there were these tiny little desks. It was meant to be completely quiet. And so I would basically go up there, set a timer for 50 minutes, and then do whatever work I had to do, study, textbooks, write, whatever I had to do for school. And then I would take a 10-minute break, walk around, listen to some music, go back and do that again. And so I did that, a few times every single night, between, 2 to 4 times. And then all of a sudden I started getting straight A's in everything. It was the most incredible thing. And it was all because of completely focusing. Most of us, we go through our entire days without doing any real focused work. I think they've done studies where they look at your average office worker. They may be at the office for 8-9 hours a day, but they're only really doing maybe an hour and a half of real work. Same thing applies to us, especially if you own a business, but really no matter what you do in life. So the ability to devote at least one, but ideally 2 or 3 chunks of complete focused work every single day is going to make a dramatic improvement in your life. So you found out who to learn from. You've triangulated these biggest ideas. You're going deep and doing really focused work every day. Another super skill when it comes to learning is forced recall. The worst way to learn is to do flashcards or to be highlighting or to just read the same passage again and again. What really makes information sink in is forced recall. So I'll do this sometimes too. When there's information that I really want to memorize, is I'll read something, whether it's an article or a book, and then I'll put that away, and then I'll either think about it or I'll write it down, the core ideas from there without looking at the material. That forced recall accelerates your learning. You can't just keep reading over the same information and absorbing it and then expect to be able to, when you actually need to use that information, to be able to recall it. So that's another very powerful skill, is to practice force. It feels more uncomfortable. It doesn't feel as easy mentally, which is exactly what you want. And at this point, you're learning how to learn, but you should really be asking yourself, what is the point of all this? Why am I learning this stuff to begin with? Which isn't a bad place to start in the beginning. But in most cases, unless you're a student in school and you're just trying to do well on tests so that you can move the next stage of life. But even then, like, this information can be useful to you. Charlie Munger later in life ended up basically going back to his college freshman textbooks and wanted to have a broader range of learning across his life. And that ended up helping him in a lot of different areas of life. Picking up principles from the hard sciences helped him learn and apply those skills in business. And so you want to be thinking about, why am I learning this stuff in the first place? Usually it's to move your life forward in one way or another. Usually it's to be able to make better decisions. So a powerful tool that I wish I would have done starting when I was like 19 years old, but I don't think I started doing it until I was around 30, is to create a decision log. And so this is a tool in which if you have a big decision you're going to make, say for example, you've learned a lot about marketing and you're like, okay, now I'm going to run this campaign. And so rather than just running the campaign and then moving on with life, write down, or at least think about, what do I expect this campaign to produce? What have I learned so far that gives me an indication that I think this is going to do well? How well do I think it's going to do? And then after it happens, you circle back and look at, how well did it actually do as compared to my predictions? This is what makes you smarter. Most people who fail in a lot of areas of life, business, investing, almost any area, you see them. It's easy to see from the outside in, but it's hard when you're in that situation. You see them repeating the same mistakes again and again and again. I have a family member who made an investment that I think is insane a very long time ago, but I don't think this person, had they sat down when they first made that and said, okay, here's what I think this investment is going to do in the next 5 years. If it does not do that, you create pre-decision points. If it does not do that, I'm going to change course, that they would still own that investment today. If you force yourself to do this, whether it's in investing, marketing, any area of your life, to predict what you think is going to happen, say that if this doesn't happen, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to change course. I'm going to learn something else. I'm going to ask for help. And then you force yourself to go back and look at those things afterwards. That'll make a massive improvement in your life. It's one of the most powerful ways to improve a business as well. There's the whole point of financial forecasting. If you say that, like, okay, we're going to do all these things this year, here's how well we expect the company to do financially, and we think our sales are going to be here. So that means we can invest here with marketing. And so if you just go off to the races and start doing that, and then you let the business run, what a lot of people will do, all of a sudden, they're not producing the sales they thought they were, but they are spending the money that they thought they were going to, because that's a very easy part of business. You can always spend more money, and then they're running themselves into the ground. Instead, what allowed us to scale one of our businesses from $17,000 a month to $5 million a month now is we decided early on we were going to forecast exactly what we were going to do in terms of revenue, what we were going to do in terms of marketing spend, and we reviewed those numbers every single month. At the end of the month, how good were our predictions, and how do those predictions need to influence what we think we're going to do for the rest of the year? That allowed us to be very nimble, to scale very quickly. So this power of either decision journal or forecasting or prediction and review can absolutely transform your life. And finally, one of the most powerful things that also especially applies to physical skills is to shut off judgment. You need to learn what you need to learn, and then you need to apply that information, and then based on that information, based on how well you do, to adjust your approach. But what do? We all beat ourselves up. I'll be doing wake surfing, for example, and then I'll try some new techniques. I'll fall off, and then I'm like, oh man, the people on the boat are judging me. I should be doing better. This is stupid. This is hard. And then you start overanalyzing and thinking, and you don't do very well. What have we all discovered in physical skills? The times we do our absolute best is when we're not thinking. And so this applies especially to learning physical skills, but also stuff in school. Like, I've never really had anxiety when it comes to taking tests and that kind of thing, because I'm like alone in a room. I either know the stuff or I don't know the stuff. So that's never been a problem for me. But things where I have to go perform mentally in front of other people. I remember when I was an investment banker for just 7 months out of college before I quit and decided to go build my own business. They had this little game. It was like a trading game, and there was like smart people around me, some of them from Harvard and all kinds of other places. And I always felt sort of nervous doing that game because I basically had to do these mental calculations on the spot. I was worried if these other people were smarter than me, or why were they learning this stuff faster? And all that judgment got in the way of my performance. So one of the last mental skills that'll help you learn even faster, which is a practice of learning what you need to learn, applying what you've learned, reviewing and seeing how you can perform better, but skipping the process of judgment, skipping the process of, oh, why didn't I do better? How come I'm so dumb at this? How can I get any faster? All this stuff does not help whatsoever. It's easy to say and hard to do, but it is a practice you should think about developing. Now that you know how to learn faster than 99% of your peers, watch this video to discover the best 15 books to dramatically transform your life this year so you can skip reading 841 others I had to go through.